Strong Dads wants to thank Quality Auto Mart for joining us as a sponsor. Quality Auto Mart was born in 1985. They are owned and operated by Mark and Nancy Repke. Quality Auto Mart provides all the services, repairs, and maintenance for your vehicle's needs with a 3-year auto parts and labor warranty. They offer complimentary vehicle safety inspection and estimates. Also, they offer a shuttle service, and the 4th oil change is always on them. They are located at 7307 on State Road 46 in Batesville, Indiana. Make sure you give them a call at 812-934-2301.
Welcome to Strong Dads. This is Merle Hutchinson alongside of my mean partner, Kyle Crawford, who this is our third take on the start of this show because every time I started it, he would rip on me for something that I was doing wrong.
What is going on?
Man, it's been a rough morning already. How about you? What's up?
Oh, not much. Just, I was just telling you before the show, it's as we're recording this, it's going to be beautiful out today, and the golf course is calling my name, but I have prior obligations that I have to attend to. So.
Young Kyle, do you have any responsibilities that you should take care of today, chap? Yeah. Oh, well, we're going to get into it today. Today we're going to get. Last week we kind of got into the Mr. Know-It-All and the Mr. Anger and the Mr. Possum guy who just kind of sits back and that's really more like the sandbagger. Mm. I like the sandbag in golfing.
No, yeah.
I don't even know how to play. And then, you know, that way you set the bar really low.
Well, that's funny you said that. So there's a guy at work. So we rotate who cooks every day, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a guy at work. He's like, hey, whenever you cook, just downplay it. Like, guys, I don't know if this is going to taste any good. And he's like, you know, I tried something new. And that way, if it's like fantastic, they're like, dude, you killed it. And if it's like, okay, you're like, well, I mean, he told us.
He told us. Yeah. You set the bar low and you can always achieve.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, today we're going to get in your head and we are going to see if there's anything there. Kyle, you got anything for me?
Nothing up there, Merle.
Well, that's kind of actually what we're going to talk about.
All right.
Why do you talk that way about yourself? Come on, be nicer to yourself.
You're right. I got it all going upstairs. My brain is highly functioning.
Yeah. All right. Today we are going to talk about the inner critic, the voice inside of our head. And maybe we should do a little bit of setting up the stage because we are going to talk mostly about the inner critic. But I think there's also another side of this. There's some guys who beat themselves up all the time. I'm no good at this. I suck at this. Every time I touch this, it goes wrong. But there are some guys who have like no critic. They are the praise God of themselves. You know, everything they think they do great and everything. And so somewhere in the middle happens to be a healthier place. All right. So we're not advocating being fake and false in your talk. We're actually kind of more advocating truth in your self-talk, but we have to distinguish a little bit between, well, what is truth? Like, you know, I keep saying I'm bad at everything. Is that really what the facts bear out?
Yeah.
Or is this just the mantra in my head?
Right.
So
yeah, I think it'll be a good show, man. As we're kind of just preparing for this show, I was just starting to tell you a little bit about some of the stuff, the inner thoughts that I have, some of the wrestling thoughts. So hopefully we'll get into that. Before we do, let's thank our sponsor, Strong Dads. We would love to thank Quality Auto Mart for coming alongside of us. Automotive needs, check them out. Really do appreciate them. They got the 3-year auto parts and labor warranty. So check them out. Let them know we sent you up there. So thanks so much for Quality Auto Mart.
All right. I also want to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions. So for all of your landscape needs, go check out Casey's Outdoor Solutions located outside of Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Man, the weather's starting to get a little bit nicer, and so maybe your brain's starting to spin about different projects for outside. Go check out Casey's.
I still have Christmas lights. I got to get out down.
Oh, no. You're one of those
I don't
people.
Turn them on every night, but Jenny said, like, birthday party for me, I need the Christmas lights down. So
when's that? Like June?
No, Mia's is St. Patty's Day, March 17th. So
come on. You need to have them down. See, do what I do. Just don't put them up.
I don't turn them on every night, at least.
All right. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of the background about sort of the inner critic, you know, the voice in our head. I work with men every day, and it seems like there's not a day that goes by where I'm not working with a man who has been kicked in the teeth. He's been beat down, whether it's a job situation, a marriage situation, kids, everything I touch has kind of gone to crap, And so I think that's obviously that's why they finally came to me, because it's become overwhelming and they're in the deep trench and they can't seem to get out. Will they ever see the light, And it's one thing when a situation puts you there.
Yeah.
So maybe you did actually lose your job. Maybe you did actually have something bad happen. So that's a situation. But it's another thing when you are the one kicking yourself in the teeth.
Yeah.
Life's going to kick you. But if you're the one that constantly puts you down in the ditch, then we've compounded the problem. We've now the whole army's against us.
Sure.
The world plus myself is trying to beat me down. And so, one of the things that we have to be aware of is how we are adding insult to the injury of an already bad situation by how we process things in our own mind.
Yeah. So, I mean, where do you see that balance? So as we, are getting into this idea of kind of, beating yourself up, whether it is an action or something you did or whether it's a situation you find yourself, where do you think the balance is between having actually like some validity behind what you're thinking and playing the victim card?
I think it's, whenever we have extremes, it's probably never quite either of the extreme. It's somewhere in the middle, right? I mean, it's probably somewhere in the middle. The day is not quite as bad or quite as good. It's somewhere in the middle. And so one of the things that we will start to kind of walk through is to fact check it, to actually go through and look at the facts and actually see, like, is that really real? Is that what my brain and the perception, is that misleading me relative to the actual facts that I'm seeing? And so somewhere in the middle is where we're looking at. And again, like, this is relative to everybody. Like, I don't know, as we talked about before, there's one guy who you actually need to reflect some of his mistakes back to him because he never seems to see them.
Right.
And then you've got another guy who can't ever see any of his successes. He only dwells on his failures and losses. And so it's trying to have a healthy view of how you're wired. I've told many times before, some of our mindsets can get us in trouble when we have certain mindsets of, I work for excellence, nothing but, winning and all these things. Like, those sound great on paper, but in the wrong mind, they can become damaging. So I have to be a little bit more general. Like, if I'm going to win all day and win, like, that sounds great to a guy who's motivated to do that. But if a guy who doesn't get a win all day, if he doesn't have the capabilities to handle the occasional loss, he can really beat himself up over that stuff.
Yeah, man. Merle, when we were talking before, something I want to bring to light as we kind of jump into, the meat and potatoes of this show. I was telling you, and I brought this, when it happened. So it's coming up on a year now. So last April, we had a fire that I was on, and I was, because of the position that I'm in, I was on the truck company. That's where I'm stationed at. And one of the duties of truck companies is to go in and search. We do search and rescue. That is the number one, in my opinion, that is the number one task that I'm assigned every single fire I go on. So in this particular day, again, nothing was different. We had a working fire. We went in there, we searched. After we had conducted our search of the entire house, we came back out. And then, once the conditions were much better in a sense of the smoke conditions weren't as bad, our investigator goes in there and they do the investigation on what happened, try and figure out the ins and outs on where the fire started. And through that process, they found a body that we had searched over top of. And to date, still one of the most humbling experiences of my life. And it is still today one of the things that does keep me up. I can't tell you the number of times where I've woken up in the middle of the night and I start thinking about that fire and what I did or what I didn't do and why I did what I did. And the crazy thing is just what you were talking about before, those guys who think that they got it all together, that they're kind of high on their own horse, right? That was me prior to that fire. I couldn't tell. I mean, if you would have put me, on paper, if you would have said, "Hey, Kyle, what would you do if you had this exact same scenario?" I would have said all day long, "I'll find that person, 100%." I'm a part of an instructing group. Like when we go out and we train on this, and I actually teach search trainings and search patterns and the best way to find people and expecting to find victims. Whenever you go into these fires, and that particular day, I just didn't have it, right? It was one of those, the situation is kind of stacked up against me. And again, it was the scenario was laid out before me. I had prepared myself numerous times for this fire, this exact fire, to go in and find somebody. We talk all the time in our training that like when you find somebody, it is your Super Bowl. It is as good as it gets for you. It may only happen one time in your career. And for me to have that situation where I mean, I'll be honest and I'll be blunt about it. I failed. I failed at my task that was laid before me. And again, is it in this situation, it was life or death. This guy did die. And again, the question could always be pegged, would he have died, had you found him and pulled him out? And those are the questions that I don't know and will never know because I didn't find him, right? And so when we talk about this idea of kind of wrestling your thoughts in your mind and kind of, being a critic of your own and then, how do we work through that? Man, when this topic popped up and I'm reading through it, that was the initial thing that I'm thinking of is that exact same, those thoughts that go through my mind almost on a daily basis. I think about that run all the time. Yeah. All the time. And it's something, because of that, I truly do believe I'm a better fireman today than I was last April because of this fire, because I had to eat a piece of humble pie. Yeah. I had to really take a step back and be like, okay, where am I at? And because of that fire, my crew, we have made changes in the way in which we do stuff because of this exact scenario. I don't ever want to experience that again. Yeah.
Well, I would just from what you explained there, and thanks for just kind of sharing that because it just comes to, it makes it real. Yep. We talked before, like if anybody thinks that we've got it all together here on this side of these microphones, you got another thing coming, and it's actually haunted you, and that haunting, I think is, without getting too weird, the idea that if I have a pervasive thought that then starts to alter in a negative way how I'm operating, like I'm done, I'm never going to fight fire again. Exactly. So versus that was the worst thing that's ever happened to me in the fire world. What am I going to do to make sure that doesn't happen again? And that's the coachability, right? Like, no, I do want to do better with this, but I better recognize that it was me that dropped the ball. Because, as you're telling this, like I almost wanted to come to your defense. I wanted to say like, well, there were other guys there too. It wasn't you by yourself. The guy was probably already, taken over by the smoke. He was probably already, passed. I want to like come and try to rescue, but the idea that you're like, well, no, let's just look at the facts. And the facts were I dropped the ball. So, I mean, I think that's really so much of the processing that we're getting to. Without going down to a lot of depth of this, Linda and I do parent coaching for a living. I just find it ironic, the struggles that we have in our own home. Okay. Right. And so make no mistake about it. The struggles that we have with some of our kids' situations are very humbling. And Kyle, you've heard me complain or be challenged. And it's like, I'm not quite sure what to do with our kid in this situation. And which allows me to first understand how other people, like rather than being a know-it-all and saying, well, if they would just do this, it'll work out just fine. But instead, like, dude, I feel you. I don't know. Like, let's brainstorm and let's be willing to throw some things out and see if something sticks to move us in a better direction. But I think right there is where growth can take place versus us getting stuck and held, captive by the haunting thoughts or the past failures. So let's talk about like, okay, how do we approach this then? If the inner critic, the failures in our past have been beating us up, let's talk about how we move through them in more of a sequential, like, okay, am I doing this or am I stuck here? Okay. The first thing I want to just talk about is just what you and I are kind of talking about, becoming aware of your thoughts. You only became aware because you got hit upside the head.
Yeah.
It would have been really nice had you been more aware prior, because you would have been more teachable and coachable in all of those trainings, and you would have had more of a different mindset going in when you search that house. You would have been like, no, like, I know that you can mess these things up.
Yeah.
And so from the very beginning, developing an awareness of the pattern of thoughts that you're having.
Okay.
So before it goes all bad, like, do I tend to ruminate on the negative? Do I tend to see the dark side of everything? Do I tend to rehash my failures? I mean, is that the type of thinking that I have? Or the flip side of that is, do I quickly move on and give myself a pass?
Yeah.
And is this how I'm wired? You know, like, just generally speaking, do I have an awareness?
So basically, I think I don't struggle with this, but in order to go through the rehab part of like an addiction, you have to admit that you have an alcohol problem. You have to actually go through that, and you're actually coming to terms with the fact that there was a problem, there is a problem, and now I'm going to move towards fixing. Is that kind of what you're getting at with the idea of an awareness?
Yeah, versus putting our head in the sand, and because it gets down to our number 2. And that is not just becoming aware, but the idea of now owning it. And we've talked about ownership so many times.
So many, yep.
But then ownership of it, because ownership allows me, if I own something, that means I get to be the one who then handles it, okay? I own a car, so I'm the driver of the car. If I don't own the car, and we see this all the time when people lease cars or they pick up a rental, we know that they don't drive them very nicely, all right? And so the idea that this is under my ownership, and so I'm going to do a much better job of managing it and taking care of it. Okay. So I'm not going to get stuck with the bad behaviors. I'm going to work to make them change.
So, I mean, with the idea of ownership, so this is something, part of this idea of thinking in my head and kind of wrestling through, when does the idea of you taking the quote unquote extreme ownership become almost harmful in the sense of, because you are trying to take on, and I'm just, again, thinking of this exact scenario. So in this fire, I have personally taken on a great deal of responsibility because it is my responsibility. I had a rookie with me at the time. So when does the idea of, okay, I'm taking ownership of this, but also just what you're talking about, and maybe I shouldn't even say the but, because maybe that's the flaw of my own, but where's that balance of taking the ownership, but also realizing, especially if you're thinking of a scenario in your life, where it was a team effort, a team, venture that you're going in, and the team in general failed, right? Where's that balance of it's my fault, but it's also the team's fault?
Sometimes I think of this as the Jesus Christ syndrome. I'm the savior of everything. It all sits on my shoulders. And there was only one of those folks, right?
Sure.
And that was Christ. And so the idea of, beating ourselves up, I need to own it. But like, let's say I'm on a team and there's 5 guys on the team and I'm the leader of that team and I drop the ball in an area. I mean, part of me being a leader of the team is also saying, hey guys, we're all in this together.
Yeah. So
we're all going to learn to own it together. And we need to take some time and figure out, okay, what do you need to do better? What do you need to do better? And so that's part of that whole idea of I can't own the actions of every individual. In the parenting world, okay? In the parenting world, I do have to own how our house is going. But I also know that my kids have free will. And at the ages when they start to get into those teenage years especially, they start really exercising their free will, which that's okay, right? I mean, that's part of how we're wired, and it's the gift and the curse all at the same time that we have that. But at some point in time, if I'm doing my job, I have to look at the other players, and in this case, it's my kids, and I have to say, so what are you doing to either help or hurt our situation? Looking at my kid and saying that. So anyway, that's that whole thing of getting stuck and ruminating with the idea of I screw up. But instead of like, stop, let's assign appropriate responsibility to all the parties involved. and then I back off and I go, okay, what's my part that I have to work on? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of something that I'm continuing to work through is this idea of, yes, I can sit there and think about that fire and I can go through all the negatives, but man, let's draw some good stuff that's come out of that. And like I said before, man, that's something that our crew has done. We have taken a step back on kind of the way in which we're going to conduct our search. We now have a basically a check and balance, right? So as soon as this is done, we're going to do this to make sure that was accomplished. So I think, yes, if you can sit back and ruminate and kind of think of all the negatives, but man, there's got to be something that comes out of that kind of helps you move forward.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to the next part of this. And so the next part is I have to learn to be seeing some of our situation here from an outside perspective. Because sometimes when we're emotionally attached to something, like if it's in the middle of our marriage or our business, we can only see it through our eyes.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it helps if I can see it through somebody else's eyes, or if somebody's willing to give me their eyes to look through. And so the idea here is, like in your case, if you were talking to one of your buddies that experienced the event that you're talking about with not doing the search well enough to find this man, and it happened to one of your buddies, what advice would you give him?
Before or after this scenario?
Well, even after. So after, what would you say to him? Like, man, dude, you're a freaking loser. Like this, you're the worst. This guy died because of you. Is that how you would handle him?
So
I hope not.
So here's the crazy thing is, because prior to April of last year, I can't even tell you the number of times we do this all the time in training. We say, expect to find victims, expect to find fires. That is your expectation when you go into a house fire. And that day, I'll be the first to admit, I failed at that. I didn't have the expect to find victims. So prior to that day, if someone would have given me this exact same scenario with a different fireman and said, this is what happened, I probably would have been pretty tough on them.
Yeah.
I probably would have been pretty tough, because I'm like, man, that's what we trained for. Maybe you should go to another training, right? And now eating that piece of humble pie, post April of last year, the seminary fire, which is where the street that it happened on, post that actually happening, man, my approach to those people, I mean, if that happens to somebody, my approach is going to be completely different. Now I know, man, not that I have, to take the gloves off and be real soft and gentle about it, because I can still be firm. Okay, this is a mistake I had. You've made a similar mistake. This is how we're going to work through it. Man, I think exactly this point of how would you approach somebody else, I think is a great way to kind of wrestle through this, because now if that exact same scenario happens to somebody else, I can help them work through it, because, okay, these are things you need to incorporate in your change, because I'm making the exact same changes, right? Yeah. And I think it goes to kind of the again, kind of the healing process of working through, because this one does burn so much in my eyes. And so just kind of working through that, working through the healing process. Yeah, today, if someone were to have that exact same scenario, man, I would be a little bit more, because I know how bad it hurts, I wouldn't be so as firm, because man, I can't tell you the days that followed that fire, the number of guys that razz me about it, because I have a strong stance in my career. Like, I am here for the citizens of Dayton, Ohio. That's why I exist as a fireman. And when I failed that, because it's the fire world, and the way we cope with a lot of stuff is we just razz each other, right? Guys just gave me a rash of shit about it, right? And looking at that now, I know that if that happens to somebody else, I cannot approach them that way.
Yeah. Well, we know that in the teaching world, your best teachers are the ones who struggle with the same thing that they see that kids struggle with. And so your best reading teacher is typically a person who struggled with reading themselves, not because they give the kid a pass, but because they understand the emotion behind it, and they understand much more effectively how to get to that kid to help raise them through it. And so, the counseling word is called empathy. The word that we would use in our man world is walk a mile in my shoes. Yeah. And so when we do that, we can actually then understand where they're at, and we know much better how to approach them to pull them through. And so when you're talking about how you would give advice, you're able to give totally different advice now because you've been in those shoes. And yet the idea here is you're not giving them a pass. The idea is, how do we get you through it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah. I mean, as we kind of keep working through this, man, I think the idea, and this is something that I continually working through, this idea of replacing, the being, because I am my own like worst, like I'm the hardest critic of myself. Right. And I think taking those thoughts and then replacing some of those critics with actual hard facts. These are what happened. This is why it happened. Again, not giving myself a pass or an excuse for what happened, but I just think this idea of taking, the critical thoughts that I have myself, are these expectations I have myself, are they unobtainable, right?
Right.
Am I going to be perfect every fire? No. But I want to be, right? But when I do fail, I have to realize that there's a human factor associated with this. I am just a man, right? So I think, replacing those critical thoughts with just actual stone cold facts here.
Right.
This is where I'm at in my career. I've been with the city of Dayton for just shy of 10 years. Like, I've not seen everything. I've not done everything. Like, those are the facts.
Yeah. I mean, so the facts are what actually get us to moving forward in reality.
Yeah.
Okay. And versus perception. We just finished watching the Super Bowl this past weekend, and at the particular event that I was at, they were cheering for their team, and their team messed up, and they're like, they suck so bad. And and I get that completely. Might have come out of my mouth. I don't know. But the idea there's really, like, you're in the Super Bowl. So for them to make the statement of they suck so bad, that's totally a relative statement, because there's a whole lot of folks out there that are much worse, right? And just the fact that you've gotten to that level. So the evidence has got to have a lot of weight when you're really evaluating, am I really as bad as I think I am? If I'm struggling with a parenting situation with my kid, I really want to be careful of just saying I'm a terrible parent, because I have to look at so many other factors, the day in and day out, the other kids, how I'm doing with all of them, all of these things come into play to help me get a better picture of the pattern. In many shows we talk about the pattern of the evidence, the pattern of the behavior. And if the pattern reflects, if I can look at you and say, Kyle, in your career, you have botched at least a dozen different searches. That's pretty significant, isn't it? I mean, in the fire world, a dozen. So I would say then we have a reason to address you.
Yeah.
As you're not paying attention. You're not very good at this. So we either get better or we get out in terms of the searches. But in your career, if you're like, man, like, this is the one, this is my mistake or my error, that's not a pattern. That's a one-off behavior. Okay. A one-off incident.
Right.
So I want to be really careful, and facts are what help me guide that.
Merle, as we were thinking about this, one of the things that popped in my head, and maybe again, this is just working through this whole process. For me, this idea of so again, taking those thoughts that I have and kind of wrestling through those. I would be lying to you if I told you there wasn't a vanity issue here. Like, I want to be seen as a fireman that's got it all together. I want to be seen as a fireman that has pulled 50 people out of a fire. Like, that's the type of fireman that I want to be. And honestly, like, just if I kind of pull the onion apart here, like, at the core, it has to be, I want to be a good fireman, because that is truly what I feel like God put me on this earth to be, as a fireman. Like, if I strip away all the vanity problems that I have when it comes to this, man, I just have to realize, like, I am good enough because God made me this way, right? And again, I think that's easy to say and harder to really obtain and actually, like, grasp and grab a hold of that. But, like, this idea of just, like, my thoughts are bad about myself, and they're partially bad because of a pride issue, right? I mean, a lot of it stems down to there's pride associated with this, and I think that's where having a faith is so huge in my life, because did I fail that day? Yes. Do I fail every day in the eyes of God? Sure. But I have a Redeemer, right? I think that is huge for me to go back to the faith component of my life and realize that, yes, I failed that day, but God has redeemed me for that.
Yeah. If I inflate my self-value, I become arrogant and non-coachable. If I constantly deflated, I become the same thing, not arrogant, but instead defeated and not coachable.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the idea here is us trying to always work to, okay, this is what I've been gifted with, but now I have to practice it.
Yep.
Life is a practice.
Yep. And you know, I mean, as we continue to work through this, I think we talked a little bit about this, but man, you have to accept your failures. You have to accept those thoughts that you have. And then there's got to be a time to move on. Okay. What am I going to do different next time? Because again, just what you were saying, if I were to the next fire go on, search over someone else, it becomes this pattern, this problem. It's like, no, there has to be some self-improvement. You have to go through the acceptance. I mean, I've talked about it before, but the whole idea of the grieving process, like you go through that, and part of the grieving process, you have to accept your shortfalls. You have to accept what has happened, and then we have to move from it. And again, there's got to be some of that self-improvement, some of the kind of the hard talks, right? We had to have some sit down at the kitchen table with our crew and say, no, we're taking a line in the sand right now. The next time we go on a fire, this is what we're going to do, because we accepted we failed in this one. We cannot do it again.
Yeah. This is the part where you actually can and should hold yourself and others accountable.
Yeah.
Beating people up emotionally and verbally has a very short lifespan in terms of effectiveness. Okay, you get okay, coach, you yelled at me. I get it. Moving forward in terms of self-improvement. Now, this is where I would say, like, if you came in and you were complaining all the time about how bad you were, and then I said, okay, so tell me what you're doing for trainings or improvements and that. And you're like, well, you know, I'm thinking about doing this and that, but over the course of the year, you haven't done anything. Now we've got a different conversation.
Yeah.
Now you really are just a bellyachre. You're feeling sorry for yourself. And so the action in self-improvement is what we have to start to see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, I mean, just as we kind of, you know, get closer to closing this out, the bottom line is these inner thoughts that you have, these discussions that you're having with yourself. Hopefully you're not answering yourself, but I mean, the inner thoughts that you're having with yourself, like those are good things, but they're good things if we use it to fuel the next step, right? If all those are just thoughts that sit up in your head, and again, it kind of trickles into playing that victim card that you are the worst, or the other side of that one of the extremes of that I'm great, right? If I were to sit back and say I'm the best fireman ever, right? Like, you know, so I think using those critical thoughts that you have, being hard on yourself, is a good thing if you use it as fueling yourself to get better, for that self-improvement, to want to be a better strong dad, a strong man. Like, you have to use those thoughts you have to fuel yourself to get better.
Yeah, great point. So the idea of taking thoughts captive, you know, allowing them to have their right place, but to understand that they're not going to be the thing that defines us. We're going to do something with them. So, you know, taming the inner tongue, you know, versus just the outer tongue. So I think that those are powerful things that we can consider doing. Hey, you know, we're wrapping this up. If you are a guy who has a reputation within your own mind, a pattern of constantly beating yourself up, you know, there are things that we've talked about right here that hopefully will help. But if not, if you find yourself obsessing, being haunted to the point where it's debilitating, or you're no longer growing, you know, it might be time for some help.
Yeah.
Some help to actually, you know, tackle this, to go in after it, and to figure out, you know, we all have a list of failures in our life, but if the failures start to define us, it's really going to be hard to win ever again. All right. And so if we can help you guys, you know, reach out to us. You can get us at rocksolidfamilies.org. You can call our office at 812-576-7625. You know, this is not something that is okay to allow to just ferment inside your head, because it's impacting so many other areas of your life.
Yep. I love it. Yeah, man. I hope you guys got something. I hope it helps kind of work through those as I, like I said, I'm continuing to work through my own dialogue in my head. So yeah, thanks so much for tuning in. Continue to share our shows. Thanks so much for Quality Auto Mart and Casey Outdoor Solutions for coming alongside of us. Really do appreciate them. Continue to allow us put shows out there, man. If you guys want us to tackle a topic with you guys alongside of you, let us know. We'd love to do that. We're always looking for things that guys are struggling with, things that guys are going through. We have a whole list of struggles and things that we go through, which is why we put shows like this together. So
yeah. You have a lot more in your head than I thought. See,
I have a lot
you do
upstairs.
have thoughts in your head.
I have a lot of things I probably shouldn't share with anybody up there.
Yeah. Please spare us on that one. All right. So again, thanks for listening, and go out there and be a strong dad. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.